Olympic athletes and service workers to the I do not dream of labour trend on YouTube. It seems like recently there is a lot of talk about disengaging from hegemonic notions of labour. And today I'm going to talk about that, specifically what that means for Black women. There is something radical and maybe even revolutionary about the notion of rest. It may seem like a trend of the moment, but it's a trend that is brought on by a complex array of issues, some stemming from the pandemic, others from a break in our culture's obsession with defining human worth by labour, and the realities of modern employment. As an organiser, and specifically as an organiser on workers' justice issues, I'm very interested in what it means to rest and to separate our worth from our productivity and all of the nuance and complexity that invokes. In this video, I am focusing on the intersection of being Black and female. Why? Well, it's because it's my lived experience, for one thing, but also because the way that Black women are both gendered and racialized means that a lot of our identity is really defined by labor and what we produce. The history of how Black women are viewed is tied up with labor. And moreover, these historical narratives about Black women and labor are affecting responses to Black women in the present day. So let's start with history. I feel I am stating the absolute obvious here. I shouldn't have to remind anyone how Black women are frequently regarded, how our pain is seen as less deserving of relief, or how our struggles are seen as an innate part of our experience due to our gender and race, and how colorism fundamentally impacts the division of labour and the labour expectations that are put upon dark-skinned Black women in particular. From slavery and the economic conditions of Black women in the post-emancipation era, labour has been a necessity. It has been the direct expectation of Black women to engage in strenuous labour outside of the home, sometimes in other domestic settings, and within their own homes as well, as a result of the way that we are gendered, and how gender roles determine household and domestic duties. Even my own ancestors, women in East Africa, were expected to engage in labour outside of the home. The notion of engaging in labour was a hallmark of a very particular type of feminism in the 20th century and to date. You may be very acquainted with the past incarnation in the 1970s, where largely white, middle-class, college-educated women pushed to gain equal footing in the workplace with their male peers. And the more modern and contemporary version, the sort of girl boss feminism, where liberation is posed as achievable through capitalistic ends and through labour. Of course, economic freedom has had a role in helping some women escape abusive situations. But when those same economic principles ensure that a certain class of women are in poverty, it only furthers the abuse for those women, regardless of whether they hold employment. The truth is, Black women have always been expected to work and have had the highest labour force participation for years. Black women are also policed in their workplaces in terms of the way they speak, the hair on their heads, and that policing can often result in a lot of job insecurity that frequently stems from these racist assumptions and expectations that go beyond the norm that other colleagues wouldn't have to deal with. Black women are also often expected to take on additional roles in their workplaces that are not in their official job description. Taking a look at office work for a moment, the pandemic has had a huge impact on how office work is conducted. In particular, a lot of office work has been remote for the past year. And while there are many reasons remote work might be a disadvantage for some women, for example, not having the office space in their home, living with multiple generations in one household, or even not having access to childcare, remote work has given some Black women the first feeling of safety in their professional lives. Remote work has given some Black women the opportunity to avoid the kind of racism and racist microaggressions that crop up frequently in the office space. While you can certainly be on the end of an abusive workplace from a remote position, it has given many Black women a glimpse of what life could be like in their careers without having to worry about their safety and having to deal with these racist incidents through the day. In short, remote work has been one of the first instances of safety for many Black women, and especially for disabled Black women who have been pushing for remote capability and flexibility and those kind of accommodations for years. As some offices insist going back into the office, it has forced Black women to confront the reality of going back to a position where they feel unsafe. The same issues have been plaguing Black women in their workplaces: overwork, underpay, rising cost of living, and ever-present racist expectations. With this comes a cognitive dissonance between what work is like and what you have been taught to value. We often define our worth through our labor. Our identities are frequently stitched to our job title, salary, and class status. If you take a look at the aforementioned "I do not dream of labor" trend, you will find a number of critiques that hinge on the sole notion that your worth is greater if you work more, and that there is an inherent moral value in how productive you are as a person. In this, you see that the exploitative tactics of employers are taken as a moral valuation of people. For Black women, one of the most dominant negative stereotypes of the latter part of the 20th century was the Reaganite welfare queen. There is an idea that not only are you a better person if you work hard and sacrifice, but that you are actively a bad person and taking away from someone else if you do not meet the labor expectations that society has for you. And this is particularly tied in with ableism as well. The idea that you are taking from people who work more than you is a very simple divisionary tactic. And it is truly a shame that it has such prevalence in our society. But its persistence is so baked into modern ideas of work. Essentially, someone's policy agenda has become a widespread belief about human worth. And here is where rest comes in. I am going to use the word rest to mean to take any action outside of a labor expectation for your own safety, health, and benefit, i.e. rest for rest's sake, not rest so that you can be more productive. Rest is the tool we are seeing in so many high-profile cases like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, who've prioritized their well-being and their mental health. Organizations like the NAP Ministry, which was founded in 2016, have even made rest the central principle for organizing. Rest is not simply an individual choice, but it can be a community building event. Rest is an act of resistance against a world that insists that your only worth lies in the labor that you are able to provide. If the notion of our humanity as Black women has always rested on what we can do for others and the work that we can provide, then is the determined act of disengaging from this not an act of resistance? Is it not a step toward liberation? And if you create the space for Black women to feel safe and rested, then are you not going against the grain of history? And while rest may be this act for collective liberation, how does that intertwine with the privilege to do so? It's hard to tell anyone to take a step back from work when their ability to house, clothe, and feed themselves relies on their ability to perform labor. Rest is, in the end of the day, I suppose, a goal more than it is a tactic. Even if it is not everyone's present reality, the ability to leave their job or take a break from their work, perhaps we will inch closer to a world where rest is a right and there will be a transformation of the reality of labor. Until then, I am going to enjoy seeing Black women make the decision to prioritize their safety and their well-being and to choose to rest. That's all for this video. I myself am gonna take a nice break. I'll see you next time.